Tonight's story is about Tamar and Judah. Now, and it's Genesis chapter 38. This particular story, yes, it is the Old Testament. It is, well, it's mostly avoided in many, Christian circles. And of course, not just because it's the Old Testament, but because of the subject. Okay. Um, and it is, well, you'll see because of the subject and the way things went out, Christianity just doesn't really like to deal with this. But it is important because it is something that has carried over for 5,000 years into our lives even today. So, um, so just for starters, one of the things, and particularly with this story, we have to know that we cannot apply our culture, our current culture that we live in, to the stories in the Bible. Now, that is what happens because they don't understand the culture of the time, which is once again what Dr. Lomsa was able to provide us this background so that we have a real meaningful understanding and not something that has been applied because of our social norms as of today. And once again, we've talked about this before about the status of women, but we have to remember the status of women, which is they were property, they were sold for slaves, and as you as you will see tonight, they were they were they were harlots, just whatever, but mainly their women were insignificant. Their only role was to bear children, and actually they were really nothing if they bore a daughter, a female child. And pretty much because you don't see them talking about daughters being born. Okay, it's always sons because it was totally male dominated, and and it was the sons that counted. All right, there were in that particular setting, that ancient setting, and even up to today, the if a daughter, a female, is born, it's not, I mean, okay, she was born, it's not really recognized that much. But boy, if a son is born, there's party, there's gifts and all that. So just have to keep that in mind with these stories, and particularly this story. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the status of women, if a woman was barren, it was a total, how can I say, it was totally shameful. The woman was looked down upon, and and she must have done something evil. So, like I say, I think it's significant to go to these stories and view from the woman's standpoint, because most of these women, like Esther and Hagar last week, they really showed their female wisdom and strength, and so you'll see that today too. Okay, so we're going to be talking about two characters Okay. And just basically, okay, Tamar was a Canaanite, and remember that's where they all lived. That it was Palestine and Israel, but that we're way back in the ancient times. So, but Tamar was not a Hebrew; she was a Canaanite. Okay, and her name means palm tree, and I'm not real sure the significance of that, but anyway, her name means palm tree. Now, Judah, if you will remember, all right, Judah was one of the leaders of the 10 tribes. Judah is the name of one of the 10 tribes. Okay. And of course, he was a Hebrew. And um, and then we have to remember that there were two Israel split into two kingdoms at one point, and the southern kingdom was Judah, and this is the Judah that, well, when I say started the started the line of the tribe of Judah, and of course, and then after generations, that is where the religion Judaism, and that's why they call it Judaism. It comes from Judah. So, all right, again, we have a lot of scripture to read tonight. And remember, just think of it as a story and read it as a story, and I'll put in some things. Now, let me tell you, and since I know all of you are on here, I don't think you have tender ears, but but this story does tend to go into some things that some people might not want to listen to, but I feel like I'm okay with you guys. So, all right. All right. So, George, do you want to start out? And we'll just go one after another. You read
Okay.
one, I'll read one.
And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Arlamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her. And she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Er. And she conceived again and bore a son, and he called his name Onan. And she conceived again and bore a son, and he called his name Shelah. And after she bore him, she stopped bearing.
Okay. So, Judah has three sons, being the firstborn. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. And Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her and raise up an offspring to your brother. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. And it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife that he spilled the semen on the ground, lest that he should raise an offspring to his brother. And the thing which he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, wherefore he slew him also. Okay, now we're going to take off a little bit here on this Onan stuff, because it is totally misunderstood. And in any event, let's go first to what they call the levirate marriage. Okay, when a man died without male offspring, his brother was obliged to marry the widow and a son born of the union was considered the son of the dead man. So, and so what that really means, okay, is okay. Had Onan um, made Tamar conceive and bear a son, that son would have become the firstborn son of who died. Okay. And he would have been the heir to the whole family, the tribe and whatnot, and and the money, whatever. And so Onan just decided he would have none of this because without that son, um, Onan would have inherited. However, all right, now I want to talk about this, and I'll probably sound like Dr. Erica on this because it's uh, okay. The beliefs of the time. Okay, in those days, everything was attributed to God because they believed nothing could happen without God's knowledge. So when uh, the first son died, okay, they said, well, he was wicked and God slew him. Now that is ridiculous. That was a belief of the time. Now, no one knows for sure what happened to Er, and we don't know, what he did or whatever. But what we do, let me just put it this way: what we do now know, and Jesus is the one that taught us, is that God doesn't slay people. Okay, and so I just wanted to bring that about because um, the man got sick or whatever, we don't know. Okay, and then so after Onan did his little trick, then the belief was that okay, the sin, he sinned and God slew him, which is again not so. Once again, nobody knows, but Onan got sick and he died. That's what you have to understand, because this is the Old Testament. That was the beliefs of the time. But as you go forward in the Bible and you go to Jesus, those were just beliefs. So, um, and Dr. Erico and Dr. Wansa believe that it was the writer of the text who believed that God slew Onan because God does not um, slay people. And when I say the writer of the text, okay, now we know um, that God didn't write the Bible. God didn't take a pen in his hand and write the Bible. Okay. And nor did he write the stories in the Bible. The stories in the Bible were inspired by God and were told, they were told by men who had been inspired by God. And um, but when it came time to write these stories down, scribes did it, and many times they would interject, their opinion. But aside from that, God does not slay people. God loves people, all his people. So, and then again, the belief was that if a man died without a son, then he was cut off from life eternal. Okay. I mean, they didn't have he'd go to hell. So, but he would be cut off from life eternal. So just wanted to understand that about Onan. Now, the other thing, all right. the spilling of the seed, okay? It is known as onanism, all right? And now this was not back then. They didn't have a clue of what masturbation was and didn't care or whatever. That was in the ancient days. But our the forefathers of Christianity and decided that the spilling of the seed was referring to masturbation. And the problem, the biggest problem then, as it has come about, uh, is that sex for pleasure, uh, outside of marriage, actually, and sometimes within marriage, okay, it is a sin, is sinful. So, but in any event, it was okay. I mean, that was a very ancient form of birth control. Okay. And then, like I say, later on, masturbation became a sin. And even if you believed that God slew Onan, it had nothing to do with the spilling of the seed. Just had to do with Onan's failure to do his duty to his brother's wife and give her a son to raise. And that's okay. And that's the deal on that. Okay. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up, for he said, lest he die also, as his brothers did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in the course of time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers to Timnath. He had his friend Hira the Arlamite. Okay. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And once again, I already talked about this, but they believed, and they said in there that the two sons were slain by God, but because they had sinned. But you see here, and this is the male dominance. This is the way it was. What you see here, well, I don't think I'm going to get. I'm not. I'm not going to let you marry, um, because, well, here he's saying that you're going to wait until Sheila grows up, but he's also very doubtful about it, because lest he should die also, and he thinks it was Tamar. Something had to do with Tamar, why the two died. And of course, that's, the women always got blamed back then, okay, and possibly even now. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Okay, and in the course of time, okay, Shua's daughter, okay, his wife died, and Judah was comforted. All right. So he was going up to Timnath. And I didn't read this, but Jewish legal tradition had it that a woman whose first two husbands died was considered a poor candidate for third marriage and should not be wedded again. Okay. All right. So on to the next scripture. Go ahead, George.
And she put off her widow's dress and adorned herself and covered her face with a veil and sat down at the parting of the road to Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she was not given to him to wife. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned to her by the way and said to her, Come, let me come in unto you. And she said, what will you give me that you may come in unto me? And he said, I will send you a kid from the flock. And she said, will you give me a pledge until you send it?
Okay, so Tamar, um, Judah had lied to her, and he was not going to give his youngest son, Shelah, to her. All right. And then we must remember that she was barren as well. And all the women, well, not Esther, but last week, Sarah, barrenness, a woman who was barren didn't had a horrible life because people would not associate with her. Uh, they were shamed because they didn't have a child. They had to have done something wrong, and so Tamar was still barren. So she was determined. Okay, and um, notice, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. But notice how it was the normal thing. Harlotry was there. I mean, it was just there, and Judah just naturally, and he was probably needy, and um, so it just it just flowed. Okay, and so she wants something remuneration of sorts, which is how that works. And so he said he would give her um, a goat from his flock. Now, and she said, well, I'm not going to just take your word for it. You have to give me something, a pledge, until you send it. So, and he said, what kind of a pledge shall I give you? And she said, your ring and your robe and the staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her and then went in under her, and she conceived by him. So, yes, did she have a plan? Yes. Was she a smart lady? She was very shrewd, and she knew what she wanted, and she knew the way to get it. And she arose and went away and took off her veil from her and put on the garments of her widowhood. Okay. Um, so the pledge that she wanted, it was Judah's ring, robe, and staff. Um, you notice I have or seal, cord, and staff. Now, these things were personal. In other words, if anybody saw them, they would know who they belonged to because that's the way it worked. So the seal and the cord, it was usually of cylindrical shape, mounted on a pin, suspended by a cord, and worn as part of his public attire. Imprints of the seal were used as signatures to represent the owner. So she has his stuff, all right, and she's pregnant now. Okay. So go ahead, George.
And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend, the Arlamite, to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, but he could not find her. Then he asked the men of the place, saying, where is the harlot who sat at the parting of the road? And they said, there is no harlot here. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said, no harlot has been here. And Judah said, let her keep the pledge, lest I be laughed at. Behold, I sent this kid, but you could not find her.
So Judah has a dilemma. Uh, Possibly now he's just saying, well, okay, let the harlot keep my stuff, and nobody will know. And, and so nobody will know I did that. And okay. All right. And it came to pass about 3 months later that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, your daughter in law, has played the harlot. And moreover, she is with child because of her harlotry. And here we go. And the man says, and Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Okay. It's her fault. She got pregnant. All right. When they brought her out, she sent to her father in law, saying, by the man to whom these articles belong, I am with child. And she said, determine whose they are, the ring, the robe, and the staff. And Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, because I did not give her in marriage to Shelah, my son. And he knew her again no more. Now, he she is referred to as his wife because, remember, I told you last week that as soon as the man goes into the woman, uh, that's his wife, uh, and he's responsible for her. But in this case, okay, there um, he did not know Tamar again. And we don't know for sure if Tamar had any other children, but it doesn't matter. Judah and Tamar technically did not. So, all right, now, and let's talk about it. And Judah said, well, let her be burned. Okay. So you had Judah approached her as a harlot, okay, like they would all do, okay. But now that she's pregnant, well, let her be burned. And that's before he knew that it was Jew. So part of, yeah, all right. What part of the thing, and I'm going to do a little bit on prostitution. I hope you don't care, because it just anyway. All right. So she they would okay, they would not normally burn a harlot if they just caught her, being a harlot in the act, but she couldn't get pregnant. All right. That was a that and that was it's a kind of a pagan thing, really. But I'm going to read to you. Let me see here.
And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, there were twins in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed that one of the babes put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand, and behold, his brother came out, and she said, what a breach has been made for you. Therefore his name was called Pharez. And afterward came out his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and she called him Zerah.
All right, now let's kind of look at this, because this is also very interesting. And I I always have to think about um well, sometimes when I would be talking to people, uh, uh, and in many of these cases, they were young people, and they were really into some of these TV, people, and they would always be saying, it's in the Bible, okay? And let's remember that many denominations say that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. And so whatever's in the Bible, is okay. But they don't read it or they don't understand. There's everything in the Bible. I mean, everything, bad, wicked, good, it's in there. But it's not in there so that to say that it's God's word and you follow it. That's not it, and that's the fallacy of most approaches to the Bible. And that's not our approach from Aramaic or Dr. Lamps's, because Dr. Lampsa believed that every every story in the Bible has some meaning for humankind. And the stories in the Bible, as I said before, were um, they were told and then written down by men who had had some experience with God and was inspired. So this way, there's so many contradictions when you approach the Bible like that. Um, anyway, okay. So let's talk about these twins and let's talk about the scarlet thread. And what was that all about? Well, we can do Pharez, of course, turned out to be the first son. His name, Aramaic, means a mighty man or a giant. And the child was named Pharez simply because he prevailed against his brother, Zerah. And the midwife expected Pharez to be born first. I messed that up. Zerah. Anyway, but Pharez was born first. Okay. And Pharez is the ancestor of the kings of Judah. And of course, the name Zerah was for brightness. All right, let's talk about this scarlet thread. Okay, the scarlet thread was placed on the hand of Zerah initially because his hand came out first, and she had to denote which one of the twins was going to be firstborn. That was highly significant. And so she put the thread on that, but then all of a sudden, Pharez came out, okay? And Pharez, of course, became the firstborn. Now, what's the thing about the red thread? The color red is alluding to harlotry. Now, we're going to go to Joshua 3:18 because this is the story of the walls of Jericho basically coming down, and Joshua had gone ahead and went to a harlot's house named Rahab. And in any event, she saved them because it says, "Behold, when we come into the land, you must bind this cord of scarlet thread in the window through which you let us down. And you shall bring your father and your mother and your brothers and all your father's household home to you." Well, okay. I don't know how many of you, I'm not asking, did you participate, but how many know or have heard about, like in cities or places, red light districts and whatnot. And that is, of course, the sign of prostitution. Well, that originated in the Bible, in Joshua. Okay. Because she put the red band, she was instructed to put the red band in the Bible. And I mean in the window. And so so um, the scarlet thread was also um, alluding to the fact that these babies were a product of harlotry. But that didn't mean anything. I mean, look, the woman didn't count anyway, but this woman, Tamar, even though the child Pharaoh was out of harlotry, so to speak, um, he became the descendant of Judah, of course. And I have this is in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1. And Judah begot Perez and Zerah of his wife Tamar. Now, there's only four women mentioned in this genealogy. And it's pretty long, and because mostly the the well, we know it's the same way in our system. It's the lineage goes according to the male and the name, the name and whatnot. And of course, it did back then, and it really didn't matter who the wife was. It was the lineage, but she ended up um, being the wife of Judah. Um, she ended up being in that line, the Davidic line, and even though even though she was born from prostitution, so to speak. Anyway, all right. Now, I thought we would just kind of talk about this a little bit because um, prostitution is in the Bible. Harlots and prostitution is mentioned throughout, including um, Jesus. Okay, but um, the prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. Okay. And so when we were talking about this story, that was like 5 or 6 thousand years ago. So hey, and in Judah's time, harlotry, I mean it was common, it was there. All right. But and of course the woman the women could be punished and they could be looked down upon, but not the man. I mean, and and there was no punishment or blame put on the man. All right, and so we have this proverb just to make this make sense. And for a harlot is a deep pit, and a strange woman is a narrow well. She destroys men suddenly and increases iniquity among men. And so there we have it again. The female is the seductress, so to speak. And it's her fault for the iniquity among men. So also, all right, being back in that very ancient time, and where it all came from, it's pagan, okay? Um, and so I just copied this because I thought it was interesting and you might like it. So one of the most unusual practices, and Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian, okay, is that of sacred prostitution, which he observed in the ancient city of Babylon. Okay, gods and goddesses, not the one god, but that was what was around them all that time in the ancient days. It compels every woman of the land to sit in the temple of Aphrodite and have intercourse with some stranger at least once in her life. Once a woman has taken her place there, she does not go away to her home before some stranger has cast money into her lap and had intercourse with her outside the temple. It does not matter what sum the money is. The woman will never refuse, for that would be a sin, the money being by this act made sacred. So she follows the first man who cast it and rejects no one. After their intercourse, having discharged her sacred duty to the goddess, she goes away to her home. I thought y'all might find that interesting. Just, um, just, well, uh, sacred prostitution, a way of making money for the church. So that's pagan. So don't say I don't endorse that, but that was, and that's where the idea of sacred prostitution came from. All right, and then and then of course it is there throughout the Bible, but I went to Matthew and the Gospels and Jesus because um and Jesus had told, he was talking to the Pharisees, truly I say to you that even the tax collectors and harlots will precede you into the kingdom of heaven. So remember, Jesus hung out with the harlots, the oppressed, the tax collectors, the sinners. That's what he did because he came to try and bring them back to God. Okay, and of course he couldn't bring the Pharisees and the scribes back to his interpretation of God because they were entrenched in their little doctrines and stuff. So, but anyway, and so Jesus, um, it's not that he condoned it or anything, but it was the harlots who listened to him and heard what he said. And one of the main ones, which we're going to do, I'm not sure when, was Mary Magdalene. So anyway, and so basically what happened, and I don't know when, but the idea of sex for pleasure started going in, even back in the Old Testament, and of course that's what we come off with today in Christianity and in this country, um, because it is immoral, and in most states it is illegal. Okay, it is not illegal in Nevada. Okay, and I put this in here, and I know that I'm wrong. Okay, but I but for the most part, women prostitutes are arrested many, many, many more times than their male customers. It's and so I guess my point is this is something it has carried over, and so many things in our lives, in our society and whatnot, really do come from the Bible, and this came from 5 or 6 thousand years ago, and we still, we still have it, but uh, it the idea of it being illegal. I mean, I'm not for or against, so I'm not don't go there. Uh, but I think by making it illegal, um, it just it makes making it illegal, all right, is not every man, and even some women, biologically they have that need. And to me, it's just a mess. And human trafficking and bringing women for sex and whatnot is just really out of hand in our country. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about prostitution. And that's where it came from. And yes, it is in the Bible. Yep. Okay. So to kind of put uh, a theme, and we did talk a little bit about this last week. The theme here is to show the steady, though not always readily visible, guiding hand of God who never forgets his people and their destiny. And so um, I just kind of Tamar's harlotry. Now, when okay, if you hear this story, if they even do it from the pulpit or from Christians and whatnot, they're going to really get down on the sin, Tamar and the sin and all that, because that's just what they do. But, you know, she she did what she needed to do, and Judah, um, he immediately acknowledged the error of his ways. And that, that in and of itself kind of makes the whole thing um maybe part of this was all part of a plan, because if Tamar hadn't conceived, then there wouldn't be the line of David that everybody talks about so much and whatnot. So anyway, that is that's the theme. The end. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you so much. And so I'm going to I just kind of put this out here. And if you have questions, or I'd love to have you comment, but you can always ask questions too. I mean, I probably wouldn't know the answer, but I can tell you, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I will find out. Okay.